Most people spend their entire lives trading hours for dollars, believing it's the only way. They wake up. They commute. They work. They come home tired. And somewhere in the back of their mind, they wonder if this is all there is. It usually is. Not because they lack talent or intelligence, but because they've been handed a script. A set of instructions written by someone else. Go to school. Get a job. Save for retirement. Follow the plan, and everything will work out. Except it rarely does. This content is for educational purposes only, not financial advice. The script most people follow wasn't designed to create wealth. It was designed to create workers. Predictable, dependable, replaceable workers. And the moment you realize that, something shifts. You start to see the pattern everywhere. The advice that sounds safe is often the advice that keeps you stuck. Take the idea of a good job. Society celebrates it. Parents push for it. Friends admire it. But a good job, by design, caps your income. You trade time for money, and time is the one thing you can never get back. You might get raises. You might get promotions. But you're still inside a system where someone else controls your ceiling. Now think about debt. Not all debt, but the kind most people carry. Car payments. Credit cards. Student loans. It's normalized. Expected, even. But debt doesn't just cost you money. It costs you freedom. Every monthly payment is a claim on your future income. A promise you made to keep working, keep earning, keep staying inside the system. And then there's retirement. The ultimate delayed gratification. Work for 40 years, save a percentage, and hope the market cooperates. Hope inflation doesn't eat your savings. Hope you're still healthy enough to enjoy it. The script tells you this is responsibility. But it's also a gamble. A long, slow gamble that asks you to sacrifice now for a maybe later. Most people never question this. They assume the script works because everyone follows it. But if the script worked, wouldn't more people be financially free? Wouldn't more people feel in control of their time, their choices, their lives? The truth is, the script doesn't fail loudly. It fails quietly. It gives you just enough. Just enough income to get by. Just enough hope to keep going. Just enough comfort to avoid the discomfort of change. And that's the real trap. Not poverty. Not disaster. But adequacy. The slow, numbing adequacy of a life that's fine. You're not struggling. But you're not free either. You're somewhere in between, and that middle ground can last decades. There's a different path. Not an easier one. Not a guaranteed one. But one where the rules are different. Where time isn't the price you pay. Where the ceiling is something you build, not something imposed on you. But seeing that path requires something most people avoid. It requires looking at the script you've been handed and asking a question that feels almost dangerous. What if everything you were taught about money was wrong? The system doesn't need to force you to stay. It just needs to make leaving feel dangerous. And it does this beautifully. Consider the paycheck. It arrives every 2 weeks, like clockwork. Predictable. Reliable. Safe. You know exactly what's coming, and you can plan around it. That predictability becomes a kind of comfort. Not freedom. Not wealth. But certainty. And for most people, certainty feels safer than opportunity. This is the trade. You give up control over your income ceiling in exchange for knowing the floor won't drop out. You accept limitation in exchange for consistency. And year after year, that trade starts to feel less like a choice and more like reality itself. The benefits reinforce it. Health insurance. Paid time off. A retirement match. These aren't just perks. They're anchors. They create dependence. Not in a cruel way, but in a structural way. The moment your livelihood is tied to your employment, leaving becomes exponentially harder. You're not just walking away from a paycheck. You're walking away from security, healthcare, stability. So you stay. Not because you love the work. Not because you're fulfilled. But because the cost of leaving feels too high. And that feeling, that's the trap. It's not violent. It's not oppressive. It's just heavy enough to keep you in place. Most people tell themselves they'll leave eventually. They'll start the business. They'll take the risk. They'll make the move. But eventually has a way of never arriving. Because the longer you stay, the more you accumulate. A mortgage. A car payment. A lifestyle. Responsibilities that require income. Consistent, predictable income. And suddenly, the idea of risk becomes terrifying. Here's the paradox. People avoid what they perceive as risky, starting a business, investing in themselves, building something outside the system, because it feels unstable. But they don't recognize the risk they're already taking. The risk that their job disappears. That their industry shifts. That their health fails before retirement. That inflation erodes everything they saved. These risks are invisible. Diffuse. Easy to ignore. But they're there. Quietly compounding. Slowly narrowing the path. The system survives because it makes the alternative look irrational. It celebrates the steady. The responsible. The patient. It makes you feel reckless for wanting more, or different, or faster. And over time, you internalize that. You stop questioning. You stop imagining. You just continue. There's a specific kind of person this affects most. Not the struggling. Not the desperate. But the comfortable. The ones doing fine. The ones with decent jobs, decent savings, decent lives. They're too secure to feel urgency, but not free enough to feel satisfied. They exist in a zone where change feels unnecessary, even though something inside them knows better. And that's where the script does its best work. Not by crushing ambition, but by quietly numbing it. By replacing the desire for freedom with the pursuit of comfort. By making you forget that predictability and security are not the same thing. Security is having options. Predictability is having a routine. Most people have the latter. And they've mistaken it for the former. The ones who break free don't do it because they're braver. They do it because they finally see the trade they've been making. Time for money. Freedom for stability. Potential for certainty. And they realize the cost was always higher than it seemed. There's a reason the phrase is spending time. Because that's what you're doing. Spending it. And unlike money, you can't earn it back. Every hour you trade for a paycheck is an hour you'll never see again. It doesn't roll over. It doesn't compound. It just disappears. And in exchange, you get money. A fixed amount. Predetermined. capped by someone else's decision about what your time is worth. This is the foundation of the system. Time for money. 1 hour equals 1 unit of pay. Work more hours, earn more money. Work fewer hours, earn less. It's clean. It's simple. It feels fair. But it's also a ceiling disguised as a floor. Most people never see it that way. They see a job as a source of income. A way to pay bills. A means to an end. And it is. But it's also a trap. Because as long as your income is tied to your time, your earning potential is tied to the number of hours in a day. And there are only so many hours. You can work harder. You can work smarter. You can get promoted. But you're still inside the same structure. A structure where your presence is required for your income to exist. Miss a day, lose a day's pay. Miss a week, lose a week's income. Your money stops the moment you stop. This is what people don't talk about when they talk about job security. Security isn't just about keeping your position. It's about what happens when you can't show up. When you're sick. When you're tired. When you need time for something else. The system doesn't care. It pays for your time, not for your life. And over the years, that adds up. Not in an obvious way. But in a slow, quiet way. You start to realize you're busy, but you're not progressing. You're working, but you're not building. You're earning, but you're not growing. Because growth requires leverage. And leverage requires something the system doesn't give you. Separation. The ability to earn without being present. To create value once and receive value repeatedly. To build something that works whether you're there or not. Most people never experience this. They confuse effort with results. They think working harder will eventually break the ceiling. But effort, by itself, doesn't scale. It just burns time. The system rewards showing up. Clocking in. Being available. It doesn't reward ownership. It doesn't reward creation. It doesn't reward the person who builds the machine. It rewards the person who operates it. And operators are always replaceable. This is why promotions feel good but change so little. A raise means more money per hour, but the model is the same. You're still trading time. Just at a higher rate. You're still capped by the same constraint. And eventually, you hit the top of your ladder and realize the ceiling was always there. You just couldn't see it from the bottom. Some people sense this early. They feel the weight of it. The repetition. The sameness. The knowledge that no matter how hard they work, the outcome is predetermined. But sensing it and acting on it are different things. Most people sense it and stay anyway. Because leaving means facing the unknown. And the unknown has no paycheck. So they stay. They optimize. They save a little more. They budget a little better. They tell themselves it's enough. And maybe it is. For a while. But time doesn't stop. And neither does the trade. Every day, you're spending something you can't replace. And the system is buying it. At a fixed rate. For as long as you're willing to sell. The question isn't whether the trade is fair. The question is whether you even know you're making it. Most people set goals. Lose weight. Save money. Get promoted. And for a while, they make progress. They feel motivated. They take action. They move forward. Then life happens. And the progress stops. Not because they failed, but because goals, by nature, are temporary. They're destinations. And once you arrive, or once you stop moving toward them, the structure that created the progress disappears. You're left with the outcome, but not the system that produced it. This is why people repeat the same cycles. They hit a goal. They celebrate. Then they drift. And a year later, they're back where they started. Same weight. Same debt. Same position. The goal was achieved, but nothing underneath it changed. Systems are different. A system doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't require motivation. It doesn't depend on willpower. It just runs. Day after day. Whether you notice it or not. Whether you're inspired or exhausted. The system continues. And over time, that consistency creates something goals never can. Compound outcomes. Think about the structure of a typical career. You work. You get paid. You spend. You repeat. That's a system. It's not exciting. It's not aspirational. But it runs automatically. And the outcome is predictable. You stay employed. You stay financially stable. You stay inside the boundaries the system was designed to maintain. Now think about debt. Credit cards. Car loans. Monthly payments. That's also a system. One you probably didn't design consciously. But it runs just as reliably. Every month, money leaves. Every month, interest accumulates. Every month, the system reinforces itself. And the outcome, again, is predictable. You stay in debt. The system you live inside determines your results more than your effort ever will. Most people don't see this. They see their actions. Their decisions. Their intentions. And they assume that's what matters. But intentions without structure evaporate. Decisions without systems fade. Action without repetition is just noise. What matters is what happens automatically. What continues when you're tired. What runs when you're not paying attention. That's the system. And that's what shapes your life. The problem is, most people inherit their systems. They don't build them. They adopt the ones they were given. Go to work. Get paid. Pay bills. Save a little. Repeat. It's a system. But it's not theirs. They didn't design it for freedom. They didn't design it for growth. They didn't design it at all. And because they didn't design it, they can't change the outcome by working harder. They're just running the same system faster. The results don't shift. They amplify. More hours. More income. More spending. More repetition. The system loops, and the person inside it mistakes motion for progress. Some people realize this and try to fix it with goals. They set a savings target. A debt payoff date. A career milestone. And those goals might work, temporarily. But the moment they're achieved, the underlying system reasserts itself. Because the system didn't change. Only the goal did. This is why motivation fails. Motivation is a spark. It starts the fire. But systems are the fuel. And without fuel, the fire dies. People rely on feeling ready. Feeling inspired. Feeling capable. But feelings fluctuate. Systems don't. The ones who break out don't do it through effort alone. They do it by changing the structure. By building a system where the default outcome is different. Where money arrives without requiring their time. Where progress continues without requiring their presence. Where the result isn't tied to how hard they work, but to what they built. And that shift, that's not about doing more. It's about designing differently. Most people never make that shift. Not because they can't. But because they're too busy running the system they inherited to notice it's running them. The system always wins. The only question is which one you're inside. And whether you built it, or it built you. Success, as most people understand it, is loud. It's the car. The house. The watch. The vacation photos. The title. The promotion. The announcement. It's visible. It's legible. It's something other people can see and recognize and validate. And that validation, that's the point. Because for most people, success isn't about what they have. It's about what others think they have. It's a performance. A signal. A way of proving they've made it. And the louder the signal, the more successful they appear. But appearance and reality are not the same thing. There are people who look successful and are not. Who drive expensive cars they can't afford. Who live in homes that stretch their income to the breaking point. Who wear the costume of wealth while suffocating under the weight of payments, obligations, and the constant need to maintain the image. This isn't rare. It's common. The system encourages it. Social media amplifies it. Advertising sells it. The message is clear: you are what you display. And if you're not displaying, you're not succeeding. So people spend. Not because they want the thing. But because they want the signal the thing sends. And every signal costs money. Money that could have been saved. Invested. Left alone to grow. But instead, it's converted into proof. Proof that they've arrived. Proof that they're doing well. Proof that they matter. And the cost of that proof is freedom. Because the more you spend to appear successful, the longer you stay dependent. The bigger the house, the bigger the mortgage. The nicer the car, the larger the payment. The better the lifestyle, the harder it is to walk away. You're not building wealth. You're building a cage. A beautiful, expensive, publicly admired cage. Quiet wealth doesn't look like this. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It's not interested in validation. It's not performing for an audience. It's not fragile. It doesn't require the right job, the right image, the right opinion from the right people. It simply exists. The person with quiet wealth doesn't drive the flashiest car. They drive the one that works. They don't live in the house that impresses. They live in the one that fits. They don't spend to signal. They spend when it makes sense. And the rest of the time, their money does something more valuable than impress strangers. It grows. Silently. Patiently. Without attention. Without urgency. Without needing to be seen. This is the part most people never understand. Wealth grows fastest when it's ignored. When it's not being touched. Not being spent. Not being displayed. The moment you start using money to prove something, you stop using it to build something. And the difference between those two choices compounds over decades. The ones who chase loud success feel productive. They're moving. They're achieving. They're checking boxes. But they're also trapped. Because every new level of success requires a new level of spending. Every promotion comes with new expectations. New standards. New pressures to maintain the image. Quiet wealth has no such pressure. It doesn't care what others think. It doesn't need the next thing. It doesn't panic when trends shift or when someone else appears to be doing better. It's patient. It's private. And because it's private, it's protected. Most people will never experience this. Not because they can't. But because they've been trained to measure success by what's visible. And what's visible is almost always expensive. They confuse the appearance of wealth with wealth itself. They see someone living well and assume they're doing well. But often, the opposite is true. The person living well is one missed paycheck away from collapse. The person who appears to be doing nothing, is free. This is the inversion most people never see. The loudest success is often the most fragile. And the quietest wealth is often the most secure. Real success doesn't need an audience. It just needs time. Talent gets attention. Patience gets results. Most people don't see it that way. They admire the quick win. The early success. The person who rises fast, earns fast, moves fast. Intelligence and speed feel like advantages. And in the short term, they are. But over time, speed becomes a liability. Because the person who succeeds early often doesn't learn how to wait. They don't develop endurance. They don't build tolerance for boredom, for setbacks, for the slow stretches where nothing seems to happen. They expect momentum. They expect progress. And when it slows, they panic. They change direction. They chase the next thing. They abandon what's working because it's not working fast enough. And in doing so, they reset. Again and again. Never staying long enough to see what patience would have produced. This is the trap of early success. It trains you to expect immediate results. It makes you believe that if something isn't working quickly, it isn't working at all. And that belief kills more potential than failure ever could. Patience, by contrast, doesn't get celebrated. It doesn't make headlines. It's not impressive to watch. It's the person who shows up. Who stays consistent. Who doesn't quit when things flatten. Who keeps going when no one's watching and nothing exciting is happening. It's boring. Unremarkable. Easy to overlook. But it compounds. Slowly at first. So slowly that it's invisible. The person who waits doesn't seem to be gaining ground. They're not making noise. They're not announcing progress. They're just there. Day after day. Year after year. Doing the same thing. Building the same structure. Letting time do the work. And then, at some point, the gap becomes visible. The person who moved fast is stuck. Spinning. Starting over. The person who moved slow is ahead. Not because they were smarter. Not because they worked harder. But because they stayed. Most people underestimate how rare that is. Staying is harder than starting. Staying requires something talent can't give you. It requires the ability to endure discomfort without needing validation. To continue without seeing proof. To believe in a process when the outcome is still invisible. Impatience disguises itself as ambition. It tells you that waiting is weakness. That if you're not moving fast, you're falling behind. That patience is for people who lack urgency, vision, or drive. But that's not what patience is. Patience is not passivity. It's not inaction. It's controlled restraint. It's the ability to resist the pull of distraction, comparison, and doubt. It's knowing that the process works, even when it doesn't feel like it's working. It's trusting time more than you trust your emotions. And emotions lie. They tell you to quit when you're close. They tell you to pivot when you should persist. They tell you that because nothing has changed yet, nothing will change. But emotions operate on short timelines. And short timelines don't reflect reality. Reality unfolds over years. Over decades. And the people who win are the ones who can tolerate the silence in between. The ones who don't need constant feedback. Who don't need to feel progress to believe in it. This is why talent alone isn't enough. Talent without patience burns bright and fades fast. It overextends. It takes unnecessary risks. It expects the world to match its pace. And when it doesn't, talent collapses under its own expectations. Patience, on the other hand, doesn't have expectations. It has a process. And the process doesn't care how long it takes. It just continues. Building. Compounding. Accumulating. Most people will abandon the process before it pays off. Not because it stopped working. But because they stopped believing it would work. They needed proof. They needed results. They needed something to show for their time. And because they needed it, they never got it. The ones who succeed don't need proof. They just need time. And time rewards the people who can wait without flinching. Most things don't last. Businesses collapse. Careers end. Relationships dissolve. Not always because of failure. Often because of fragility. The structure couldn't handle pressure. The person couldn't handle time. The system worked, until it didn't. Durability is rare. And because it's rare, it becomes valuable. The person who lasts isn't always the smartest. They're not always the fastest. They're not always the most talented. But they're still there. Years later. Decades later. Still operating. Still reliable. Still present. And over time, that presence becomes something more than just survival. It becomes trust. Trust is invisible capital. You can't see it. You can't measure it directly. But it accumulates. Slowly. Through repeated behavior. Through consistency. Through showing up when others disappear. Through staying calm when others panic. Through delivering when others make excuses. Every time you do what you said you'd do, trust grows. Every time you remain stable while others destabilize, trust grows. Every time you endure without collapsing, trust grows. And trust attracts opportunity. People gravitate toward what is dependable. They invest in what lasts. They work with those who won't vanish. They build with those who won't quit. Not because dependability is exciting. But because it's safe. And in a world full of volatility, noise, and chaos, safety becomes a premium. This is why the flashy often lose in the long run. They grow fast. They attract attention. They make bold moves. But bold moves are fragile. They require perfect conditions, perfect timing, perfect execution. And when conditions shift, the bold collapse. The quiet, the durable, the consistent, they don't require perfect conditions. They just require time. And time is the one thing no one can avoid. Most people underestimate this. They think success is about being exceptional, about standing out, about doing something no one else can do. And in some ways, that's true. But exceptional doesn't mean durable. Exceptional often means unstable, high performance, high risk, high burnout. Durability is different. It's not about being the best. It's about being there. Being reliable. Being the one who doesn't need to be managed, convinced, or reminded. The one who operates the same way whether things are going well or poorly. And that steadiness. That's what people remember. Not the big win. Not the impressive moment. But the person who was there consistently. The one who didn't disappear when things got hard. The one who didn't change their behavior based on circumstance. Reputation is built this way. Not through announcements. Not through milestones. But through accumulated proof. Small, repeated actions that form a pattern. And once the pattern is established, it precedes you. People know what to expect. They know you'll show up. They know you'll deliver. They know you won't collapse. That knowledge is worth more than talent. Because talent without reliability is a gamble. And most people, over time, stop gambling. This is why the durable inherit opportunity. Not because they chase it, but because it flows toward stability. Money flows toward what it trusts. Influence flows toward what it trusts. Relationships flow toward what they trust. And trust only flows toward what lasts. Most people never build this. They're too impatient. They want results before they've proven durability. They want recognition before they've established reliability. They want trust without earning it through time. But trust doesn't work that way. It's not negotiable. It's not something you can shortcut. You either accumulate it through repeated consistency, or you don't have it. And without it, everything else is temporary. The win that doesn't last. The success that collapses. The reputation that fades. Not because the person lacked ability, but because they lacked endurance. Speed gets you started. Brilliance gets you noticed. But durability is what keeps you in the game long enough to win. Money doesn't change you. It reveals you. But before it reveals anything, it does something quieter. Something most people never talk about. It removes pressure. Not all of it. Not permanently. But enough. Enough that you stop reacting. Enough that you start choosing. Enough that the space between what happens and how you respond, grows. That space is what most people are missing. When money is tight, everything feels urgent. Every decision has weight. Every expense creates stress. Every unexpected cost becomes a crisis. You're not choosing. You're responding. Reacting. Surviving. And survival doesn't require clarity. It requires speed. So you move fast. You say yes when you shouldn't. You take opportunities you don't want. You tolerate situations you'd walk away from if you had the option. But you don't have the option. So you stay. And over time, that reactivity becomes your default. Not because you're weak, but because the pressure never stops. Financial stability doesn't eliminate decisions. It changes the conditions under which you make them. You're no longer choosing between bad and worse. You're choosing between good and better. Or between something and nothing. And nothing becomes a real option. You can say no. You can wait. You can walk away. That shift is subtle. But it changes everything. The person with financial pressure speaks differently. They're careful. Deferential. They can't afford to offend. They can't afford to disagree too strongly. They need the relationship. They need the opportunity. They need the outcome to go a certain way. The person with financial stability doesn't need anything. They can be honest. They can be direct. They can afford to lose. And because they can afford to lose, they often don't. This is the paradox. The less you need, the more you receive. Not because the world rewards detachment, but because desperation repels. It's visible. It's felt. And people avoid it. Not out of cruelty, but out of instinct. Stability, by contrast, attracts. It's calm. It's patient. It doesn't push. It doesn't convince. It simply is. And that presence, that lack of urgency, creates trust. People feel safe around it. They don't feel manipulated. They don't feel pressured. They feel like they're dealing with someone who will still be there tomorrow. And they're right. Most people think money is about what you can buy. The house. The car. The vacation. The thing. And those things matter. But they're not the point. The point is the space. The space to think. The space to choose. The space to exist without constantly calculating whether you can afford to. That space is what wealth actually provides. And once you have it, you realize how much of your life was spent without it. How many decisions were made out of fear. How many opportunities were taken because you couldn't afford to decline. How many relationships were maintained because you needed them, not because you wanted them. Stability doesn't make life easy. It makes it yours. You still face difficulty. You still face loss. You still make mistakes. But the mistakes don't destroy you. The losses don't define you. The difficulty doesn't force you into corners you can't escape. You can breathe. You can wait. You can choose poorly and recover. And that ability to recover, that's the difference. Most people live one bad month away from collapse. One unexpected expense. One lost job. One health crisis. And that proximity to collapse shapes everything. How they speak. How they move. How they think. The ones who step away from that edge don't become different people. They just become themselves. Without the static. Without the noise. Without the constant hum of worry running underneath every decision. And once that hum stops, you realize how loud it always was. Most people don't want freedom. They want escape. They want out. Out of the job. Out of the routine. Out of the pressure. Out of the life they've built but no longer recognize. And they think money is the way out. It's not. Money doesn't provide escape. It provides options. And options only matter if you know what you're choosing. If you're running from something, money just gives you a longer runway. You'll still crash. Just somewhere else. This is the difference no one talks about. Escape is reactive. It's driven by discomfort. By frustration. By the belief that the problem is the situation, not the structure underneath it. So people leave. They quit. They change cities. They start over. And for a while, it feels like progress. But the pattern follows. Because escape doesn't solve the underlying issue. It just relocates it. The person who escapes a bad job without understanding why it was bad will find another bad job. The person who escapes debt without changing their spending will recreate the debt. The person who escapes responsibility will find new ways to avoid it. Escape is temporary relief. Freedom is permanent structure. Freedom isn't the absence of obligation. It's the absence of coercion. It's not about doing nothing. It's about doing what you choose. And choice requires something escape doesn't: clarity. Clarity about what you want. Clarity about what you're willing to tolerate. Clarity about what you're building toward. Without that, freedom becomes chaos. You have options, but no direction. You have time, but no purpose. You have money, but no idea what it's actually for. This is why money ruins some people. Not because it corrupts them, but because it exposes them. It removes the constraints that were holding their behavior in place. And without those constraints, the person underneath emerges. If that person is chaotic, the money amplifies the chaos. If that person is disciplined, the money amplifies the discipline. Money doesn't create character. It reveals it. The ones who chase escape don't understand this. They think the problem is external. The boss. The system. The circumstances. And sometimes, that's true. But more often, the problem is internal. The inability to delay gratification. The inability to endure discomfort. The inability to stay committed when things get boring. These patterns don't disappear with money. They intensify. Real freedom is quieter than people expect. It's not dramatic. It's not liberating in the way movies portray it. It doesn't feel like breaking chains. It feels like calm. Like the absence of urgency. Like having time that belongs to you and knowing what to do with it. It's not about never working. It's about working because you chose to, not because you had to. It's not about avoiding responsibility. It's about choosing which responsibilities to carry. It's not about doing nothing. It's about doing something that aligns with who you are, not who you were told to be. And that alignment, that takes time to find. Most people never find it. They spend their entire lives reacting. Escaping one thing. Chasing another. Never stopping long enough to ask what they actually want. And when they finally get money, they realize it didn't answer the question. It just made the question louder. Freedom requires structure. It requires knowing yourself well enough to make decisions that won't self-destruct. It requires restraint. Patience. The ability to hold something without needing to spend it, use it, or prove it. Escape requires none of that. Escape just requires momentum. And momentum, without direction, is just motion. The person who escapes will keep moving. The person who finds freedom will stop. Not because they're tired. But because they've arrived. And arrival, Arrival doesn't look like what most people think it does. It looks like a Tuesday. A quiet one. Where nothing extraordinary happens. And that's enough.